Hey guys, it's Mr. B. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm just going to go over the very basics of starting your children's book illustration for the illustration project. Um, Really, these are things we've covered in class, so I don't want to go too in depth, but I want to have this as a look back for you guys. So if you've forgotten how to do something, you can go back and watch this video. Um, so the first thing you need to do, obviously, is start a new document. So once you have Photoshop open, if you press Control N, it will bring up the new document dialog box. Change the name of your file to book cover or illustration or whatever it is you want that you'll remember when you're going to open it the next day. Resolution for this one, change the pixels per inch to 300 first, and then change the width to 3000 and the height to 2400. That's going to be it's a pretty standard size for a children's book illustration. You can leave the background white because on this one, we're not actually going to print all of these out. We're going to put them in a PDF, but the idea is it'll be on a white background similar to how a book would be printed. So once that's ready, hit OK, and you'll have your workspace. So one of the things I talked about in class was using grouped layers to kind of shade things or to show highlights on something. And I want you guys to try to have some shading in your drawing, whatever it is that you're going to draw for your picture. So what I do first when I'm doing an illustration like this is I'll do a simple sketch. I'll do a line drawing. Just kind of as a base to start with. So I'm going to keep this very simple just for the purposes of the demonstration. And I'll have another video that kind of shows what my finished illustration looks like, or close to finished anyway. And then what to do with the text and all that. But for starters, what you're going to need is to be able to start drawing. So the first thing I do when I'm working on an illustration like this is I create a new layer. And to make a new layer, Control-Shift-N. We'll bring up the new layer dialog box. And I'm going to rename the layer over my layers panel to sketch. And for this, like I said, I'm just going to keep it very simple. I'm just going to draw a kid kind of standing there. Oh wow, that's something. That's a thing. Wow, this tablet is not working right. So you can see this sketch is really rough. I'm just going to try and get proportions what I want, you know, where the facial features are. I maybe should be looking sad. And we'll have him holding a lunchbox. Now you can see with this, oh wow, that's awful. I'm kind of working too large. I'm running out of space. So if you find that that's happening, use the tools available to you. Instead of erasing everything and starting over right now, I can use the Move tool. I can scoot him up. I can shrink him down a little bit and just get him to a different size. So once I have a really rough sketch, and this one is really rough, what I'll usually do is I'll go to the opacity slider in the layers panel and just turn it down to about 30, 40, something so that I can still see what I'm doing, and then I'll zoom in more. And you guys, I probably did this demonstration for you. If you zoomed really far out, it's like sticking your arm out as far as you can and trying to draw like that. If you want to get more detailed or get better looking drawings, zoom in more. So now for my second layer, and I'm going to make a new one, and I'll just call this line 1. And if I end up liking it, maybe I'll keep it, but if I don't, I can always do another. I'm going to change the diameter of my brush to be a little bit smaller. But then on this layer, I'm going to refine everything and make it look less clunky. Or try to, anyway. Now, you know, I'm pretty good at drawing. There's no real nice way for me to say that. And I've had a lot of practice. So if you're finding that you're having trouble drawing a kid, even, you know, struggling to draw a lunchbox or hat or, you know, anything at all, use the internet. The internet is your friend here. Look up a picture, work from a model. Don't just try to wing it all from memory. You know, in a digital class like this, you have a whole wealth of options available to you that you don't normally have in the classroom. You know, and in 6th grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, you know, I was able to print pictures for you guys, but in this case, you're sitting right at a computer with all of Google Images available to you. So I'm not saying go copy a picture that already exists, but if you need to look at something to see how does an arm look in this situation, how does a kid's leg bend, what does a lunch table look like, don't just try to do it all from memory. You know, use the tools that are available. So I'm gonna finish my horrible little lunchbox here and finish the leg. And let's zoom out and see how things went. Okay, so this kid looks like he's about 16, which is not the best thing, but there's a basic line drawing. Okay, so just to recap, I started with a rough sketch. Now I've filled it in with my line drawing. I'm going to go back and give him some eyes so he doesn't look like he's supposed to be in an X-Men comic. Those of you that have read X-Men comics will know what I'm talking about. None of them have pupils. Okay. So we got this kind of sad looking student with his lunchbox, and now we need to move on to adding some color. And I think we're going to have to do that in the next video, so I'll see you in a couple minutes. So as I was sitting here waiting for that first video to download, I noticed this kid's got just a crazy huge ear. So let's say I like the big ear, and I don't like that the other one is so tiny. I could erase it and try to redraw it. Or, again, use the tools available to me in Photoshop and just duplicate the ear. So I'm going to use the lasso tool. I'm going to carefully draw an outline around my ear. And then if you remember, Control J creates a duplicate layer. So if I use the move tool now, you can see layer 1 popped up in my layer panel. I've got another ear, and it's the same as the one on the other side. So now I would use my eraser, make sure I'm on my line drawing layer, and I can erase the tiny ear. And if I go back to layer 1, I can erase little extra bits of hair that were stuck to it. But now it's facing the wrong way. So what I can do to fix that is I go to Edit, Transform, and Flip Horizontal. And now I can move that ear into place. I can use the Move tool to rotate, to change the position. And then when I'm ready, I'll click any other tool in my toolbar and hit Apply. Alright, now I'm feeling a little better about his giant ear. If you do that and you have a separate layer, so now the only thing I have on this layer is the ear, and if I want it to be in my line drawing layer with everything else, I can press Control E, and that merges every layer down one. So it basically squished the two layers together now, and now if I click the eyeball, everything's together on one layer. Alright, next part is to start painting. And for this, rather than color his entire body, I'm just going to do his face, eyes, and ears so that you guys don't have to, you know, this be a good way to just kind of show how to use grouped layers to do some shading. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call it Base Color. And you know what? I'll call it Face Base, because this way I can do all my facial color on one layer and then not have to worry about what's happening on any of the others. So to start, I'm going to pick a color just to kind of be the main skin tone. So if I were coloring in crayons, this would probably be the only color I would add. I'm going to turn my opacity up to 100%. And I'm going to start coloring. And I'm going to switch my brush to something with a hard edge. Right now I've got something you can see it's a little bit blurry. And that's nice for some things, but for this I want to keep a nice hard edge, almost like I'm using a marker to color him in. And I'm just gonna, I can add the white of the eyes back to it later. I'm just gonna color over that for right now, because right now we're just focused on the skin tone. That's another advantage of layers. Right now I can just use a different layer at a later point to do the eye color. Alright, so now I have my base color for his face. It's not perfect, and you don't have to be, you know, little kid with a coloring book perfectly inside the lines, because you can go back later and touch it up and erase if you see areas that are a little off. So one thing I want you guys to try to do on this project, and I know I said it earlier in the video, is to shade. Now, a couple options are when you can shade using the burn tool, which is in this tool menu here, right under the gradient and paint bucket tools. The burn tool, what it does is it will, if you keep the same color selected, it will just slightly darken it every pass of the brush. And if I keep the exposure around 50%, it won't get too dark too fast. And that's nice, but the one disadvantage of the burn tool, you know, there are good things and bad things about it. One bad thing is I'm coloring directly onto my base layer, so if I make a mistake, it's like that forever, which can be a problem. So if, you know, I start coloring and I realize, oh, okay, well now he has ketchup stains all over his chin, there would be nothing I could do about it unless I had made a copy of the layer. So while it can be nice to not have to worry about it, you can run into some problems. So my suggestion, and what I think works better, I'm not going to tell you you can't use the burn tool, but what I like to do and what I think will work better for you guys is create a new layer. I'm going to call this one Face Shadow. And I'm going to click the Group with Previous Layer dial, or the checkbox. If you look in the Layers panel here, there's a little arrow pointing down to the layer that it's grouped with, meaning that no matter what I do now, and if I wanted to color him blue at this point, I would select the paintbrush, and I can scribble all over the entire painting, but it's only going to stick to the layer that it's grouped with. So this is great for shading, because now I can pick a softer brush, something with soft edges, and I suggest you turn the opacity down low to something in the 20s, and pick a color that's a little bit darker than whatever your base color is. So in this case I'm going to pick a tan that's a little bit darker. So I'm going to add some shadows inside his ears, and again, this is a great place to use a reference. If you can find a photo of a face, see where the shadows are. They'll usually occur under the eyebrows, under the nose, under the chin, and on the neck. So again, nothing too crazy. I'm going to add a little bit darker shadow under his nose here, and a little bit more dark under his neck. You can also add highlight layers, which the same thing. You would pick a color that's a little bit lighter. And again, I would make a new layer, call it Face Highlight, and group it with the previous layer again. And here, I'm not expecting you guys would know where all the highlights would go on a face and all that stuff. But I would like you to try to use some three-dimensional looking shading in whatever it is that you end up drawing. So that's how I would start it off, and then from there I would continue making a base layer for each thing, essentially. let's see. I wonder if I can find that illustration somewhere. Just a moment. We'll get back to you.